As every week, you in for a good one. It's the health tip of the week with LOJ Fit Club. Tori checking in. Hey, listen. As you can see now in the title, because I didn't have it up there before, this cheese help promote or increase or cause responsible for prostate cancer. Yes, dairy and including so much more. I just chose to talk about this one thing because this is an increasing problem, especially for those of us who are quote unquote African Americans or Africans in America. So we're going to dive deep and learn about dairy, learn about the cheese industries, learn about the dairy industries and their, tactics. The reason why it's so important to watch these videos that we recreate is because we help bring you factual information through accredited studies, with medical doctors and things like that. However, on the flip side, there's a thing that even a lot of them are missing, which is the spiritual component and how the spiritual component ties into all of this. Understanding deceptive language, understanding, what an adversary is and how it's in a practical format in society versus just reading these stories in ancient, ancient spiritual text and just thinking that this is some kind of like fairy tale, or you only see it in a movie. No, it's in your everyday life. So if you don't understand and if you can't, discern, then you're going to be a part of the matrix. And not only be a part, when you're ignorant to the fact, then you start to defend it. You defend these things, not even knowing that it's killing you and everybody else. So this is what we're dedicated to doing. We let those who, take their time and understand and study the facts. We bring those to you. That's unpopular, right? But on the flip side of it, we want to make sure that you understand the spiritual significance in all of this and how this is it has effects on your soul. Okay? So with that being said, we're talking about dairy. We're talking about the effects of dairy. We're talking about, how the pharmaceutical industries are all tied. Man, it's just it's complex. And if you don't take the time and if you don't have the interest in learning this, then you will in fact become a victim and find yourself not only victimized but defending, the perpetrators. So with that being said, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's watch some videos and starting now.
According to Dr. Walter Willett, who has done many of the studies and reviewed this topic extensively, there are many reasons to pass up milk, including 1, milk doesn't reduce bone fractures. Contrary to popular belief, eating dairy has never been shown to reduce fracture risk, but dairy may actually increase the risk of fractures by 50%, according to the Large Nurses Health Study. Less dairy equals better bones. Countries with the lowest rates of dairy and calcium consumption, like those in Africa and Asia, have the lowest rates of osteoporosis. Next thing is that calcium isn't as bone protective as we thought. Studies of calcium supplementation have shown no benefit in reducing fracture risk. Vitamin D, on the other hand, appears to be much more important than calcium in preventing fractures. Also, calcium may raise cancer risk. Research shows that higher intakes of both calcium and dairy products may increase a man's risk of prostate cancer by 30 to 50%. Plus, dairy consumption increases the body's level of insulin-like growth factor 1, a known cancer promoter. Calcium has benefits that dairy doesn't. Calcium supplements, but not dairy products, may reduce the risk of colon cancer. And another problem with dairy is that not everyone can stomach dairy. About 75%, or 3/4 of the world's population, is genetically unable to properly digest milk and other dairy products, a problem called lactose intolerance. So based on such findings, Dr. Walter Willett has come to some important conclusions. One, everybody needs calcium, but probably not as much as our government's recommended daily allowance of 1,500 milligrams a day. Two, calcium probably doesn't prevent broken bones. Few people in this country are likely to reduce their fracture risk by getting more calcium. Three, men may not want to take calcium supplements. Supplements of calcium and vitamin D may be reasonable for women. And four, dairy may be unhealthy. Advocating dairy consumption may have negative effects on health. Now, this is from Dr. Walter Willett, not me, so you should think about your next glass of milk. If all of that isn't enough to swear you off milk, there are a few other scientific findings worth noting. First, the Federal Trade Commission recently asked the USDA to look into the scientific basis of claims made in their milk mustache ads. The panel of scientists stated the truth clearly. Number one, milk doesn't benefit sports performance. Number two, there's no evidence that dairy is good for your bones and prevents osteoporosis. In fact, animal protein in it may actually help cause bone loss. Number three, dairy is linked to prostate cancer. Number four, it's full of saturated fat and it's linked to heart disease. Number five, dairy causes digestive problems for 75% of people with lactose intolerance. And number six, dairy aggravates irritable bowel syndrome. Simply put, the FTC asked the dairy industry, got proof? And the answer was no. Plus, the dairy may contribute to even more health problems like allergies, sinus issues, ear infections, type 1 diabetes, chronic constipation, and anemia in children. But what about raw milk? Well, isn't that a healthier form of dairy? Well, not really. Yes, raw, whole, organic milk eliminates some of the concerns, like pesticides, hormones, antibiotics, and the effects of homogenization and pasteurization. But to me, these benefits don't outweigh dairy's potential risks. From an evolutionary point of view, milk is a strange food for humans. Until 10,000 years ago, we didn't domesticate animals, and we weren't able to drink milk unless some brave hunter-gatherer milked a wild tiger or a buffalo. Now, most scientists agree that it's better for us to get calcium, potassium, protein, and fats from other sources, like whole plant foods, vegetables, fruits, beans, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and seaweed. Great source of minerals. Convinced yet? Well, here's my advice for dealing with dairy. If you want healthy bones, take vitamin D. Don't rely on dairy. Get your calcium from dark green leafy vegetables, sesame, tahini, sea vegetables, or sardines, or salmon with the bones in it. And try giving up all dairy, everything, and see how you feel after a few weeks. And if you can tolerate dairy, use only raw organic dairy products, preferably fermented products like yogurt or kefir. Still got milk? I hope not. Remember, dairy is not crucial for good health. I encourage you to go dairy-free and see what it does for you.
Now, in that first video, some key points, to take note of. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the next video to show you. Now, we understand the effects, and this is all facts, the effects of dairy. But now I'm going to go and show you another video, very short, of explaining how it's, with this information, understanding how is this just like cigarettes that kills 400,000 people a year, how is it still being promoted and propagated? And not only just being promoted and propagated, except this is still being promoted as if it's something good. Okay, so not even giving the everyday person a chance to, decipher whether I want to eat cheese or not, even though I know it causes this, this, and this. Okay, so with that being said, I'm gonna go into the next video and let's go into it.
In a series of videos I did about saturated fat, I talked about a major campaign launched by the global dairy industry to neutralize the negative image of milk fat among regulators and health professionals as related to heart disease. That campaign continues to this day. with the publication of a meta-analysis demonstrating neutral, meaning non-harmful associations between dairy products and cardiovascular disease and death. OK, well, first of all, how do we know the dairy industry had anything to do with this study? Well, it was published in a journal that forces authors to disclose financial conflicts of interest. Let's see what they divulged. Dairy, 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 the fourth largest dairy company in the world, dairy, dairy, milk, beer, soda, McDonald's, dairy, 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 dairy. Oh, and the study itself was explicitly funded by dairy, dairy, dairy. OK, then. The other big new one was this, suggesting that a little bit of cheese every day isn't just neutral, but actually good for you. And they make it clear that they have no conflicts of interest. They're just employees of the Yili Innovation Center and the Yili R&D Center. You know, China's largest dairy producer, making it one of the world's largest dairy companies. OK, but how can cheese consumption be associated with better health outcomes? Well, most of these studies were from Europe, where cheese consumption is associated with a higher socioeconomic status. See, in Europe, they're not eating Cheese Whiz and Velveeta. Cheese is generally an expensive product, and so who eats cheese? Those with higher-paying jobs, higher socioeconomic strata, higher education levels, all of which are associated with better health outcomes, which may have nothing to do with their cheese consumption. Higher socioeconomic groups also consume more fruits and vegetables, and more candies. So I bet you could do a population study and show candy consumption is associated with better health. Shh, don't tell the National Confectioners Association. Too late. Did you know that candy consumers have lower levels of inflammation? A 14% decreased risk of elevated blood pressure, brought to you by the candy industry and the USDA, our government, which props up the sugar industry to the tune of $1 billion a year. It's like when our tax dollars are used to buy up surplus cheese. Paul Shapiro wrote a great editorial. Imagine the headline, "Government buys $20 million in surplus Pepsi," or hard-earned tax dollars buying up millions of unwanted cola cans, all as a favor to the flailing soda industry, which just kept producing drinks no one wanted. As outrageous as such a government handout to the soda industry would be, that's exactly what the USDA is doing for the dairy industry. Michelle Simon did a great report on how her government colludes with the industry to promote dairy junk foods. The federal government administers checkoff programs to promote milk and dairy. McDonald's has 6 dedicated dairy checkoff program employees at its corporate headquarters to try to squeeze in more cheese. That's how we got double steak quesadillas. That's how we got 3 cheese stuffed crust pizza, complete with a summer of cheese. These funds are being used to promote foods that contribute to the very diseases our federal government is allegedly trying to prevent. Does it make sense to tell Americans to avoid foods high in salt, sugar, and saturated fat while engaging in the promotion of those same foods? Look, the meat and dairy industries can do what they like with their own money, but the public power of taxation should be used for the public good, not to support the dairy and candy industries.
If you don't understand that, I don't have much to say. If you don't understand that, I don't have much to say. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you my different points on each video. From the first video, second video, then I'm going to give you some advice and some tips on how to be able to move forward from here. First video was, he was talking about the 6 reasons why you should avoid dairy. So that was a setup video to show you, to give you some facts of why it's even bad in the first place. Second video was more about how, even though they know this, they're still promoting it and promoting it heavier than ever before. Number 1, dairy increases fractures by 50%. Dairy can increase fractures up to 50%, meaning that your bones are actually weakened versus being strengthened as promoted, because it's animal protein which your body does not digest. Okay. Number 2, Africa and China have way lower and in some cases, no cases at all of osteoporosis. Okay, where this is caused by heavy dairy consumption. Okay, in these places, they don't consume a lot of dairy, which then a lot of problems that are faced over here, they virtually do not have. I got other studies that I'll show you in the near future with like high blood pressure, diabetes, and these things in African villages. These things don't even exist. Over 20,000 people they studied and not one case of it. If you did every 20 people, you would have 3 to 4 cases of it over here. Okay, what's the difference? Okay, so are we really, quote unquote, as it relates to America, are we really that advanced? Are we advancing in other things such as technology and, digressing as it relates to health and what really matters? Thanks to Steve Jobs for being able to, add into the, technology as it relates to making it convenient for, people to do good works as it relates to iPhones and things like that. But unfortunately, Steve Jobs is not here to enjoy these achievements. And he understood latter part of his life how important health was, but in the beginning part, not so much. Just being real with y'all here. Okay. Number 3, dairy increases the risk of prostate cancer in men by 30 to 50%. This was the highlight. Okay. Because this is something that I did more study on, and it's very true. Dairy increases the risk of prostate cancer in men by 30 to 50%. So I know a lot of our viewers are females, but if you have husbands, if you have sons, right? If you have brothers, if you have fathers, and grandfathers, this is a statistic that you may want to take heed of. Okay. Number 4, 75% of the world cannot genetically digest dairy products. 75% of the world's population cannot genetically digest dairy products. So that means 3 out of 4 people cannot digest dairy products. Now, don't get it twisted. Just because it means that you can't digest it doesn't mean that it's allergic from you getting it down. But if you're having stomach issues, which a lot of people I know does, it's probably from your dairy consumption over large periods of time, which have now created real problems in your stomach. That's probably one of the most contributing factors. Your body, 9 out of 10 times, cannot digest it. You could put it in there just like I could choose to swallow gum. My body doesn't digest gum. Okay, I can choose to swallow gum, but my body doesn't digest it. Same thing with dairy. Okay. All right. That's that video. Next video. Okay. Showing that the campaign, right, of showing and promoting that dairy is not harmful, right? Still to this day, these campaigns go on. And what he was showing is he said, okay, well, let's look at the campaigns. Let's, thoroughly investigate it. But then when you follow, right, because that kind of article required, non-disclosure, right, of, those who actually funded it and were behind it. And what he was showing is that the dairy industries, multiple, were behind all of the studies. So, of course, it's like a cigarette company coming out and showing you the health benefits of cigarettes. Well, in fact, in the 1940s, 30s, and stuff like that, when cigarettes started to come out, or when cigarettes started to be very promoted mainstream, guess what? There's newspaper articles that you can go find right now of them saying how cigarettes are beneficial for your health. It's crazy. So, next thing was the study that they were trying to use as relates to cheese being better for you is a study that he was saying came out of Europe, multiple studies that came out of Europe, due to the fact that um, those who were, economically, more inclined and had more, money than just the lower class consumed more dairy. So then they said, well, because that's the case, that means that we know it's good for you. And what he was showing the comparison was, that's like them saying that candy is good for you because those who are, again, in the upper class also consume more candy. So does that mean that it's good for you? Absolutely not. You can never take that and say that that's why it's good for you, because there's so many other factors, which we know longer lives have to do with, first of all, if you're more educated, you're more inclined to live longer, right? If you have a career, you're more inclined to live longer because you have more of a purpose and drive to want to live and to do the things necessary. You also, guess what? They also eat more fruits and vegetables. And then they also exercise more. So that's what study they were trying to use, which is null and void and absolutely ridiculous. Okay. And here's where, people should really be mad is that the government funds, aka your tax dollars, are being used to implement more dairy consumption, even to the point to where these big time companies, if they have an excess amount of dairy being distributed, and if it's not being consumed, they'll buy it up and use it for other purposes just so it does not, because they're on a mission to get dairy and cheese to you. So then the question is that why is it? That's what we're going to be talking about in a second. Why would they even do that? Okay. Knowing that dairy is full of salt, sugar, and saturated fat. It's processed. And it's killing people. And even in its natural form, it still was not made for you. It was made for a baby calf. Point blank, period. Now, many of you know all these things. Let's talk for a second. Many of you know all these things already. What I found is the challenge is just, how do I break myself of this? Because they do have this every single place that I go to, everywhere I look around, everything has dairy or egg in it. Okay. How do I break free from this? Of course, the number one answer is education. Education in the form of dedication. So that way you dedicate yourself to apply the knowledge that you learn. Okay. The other is support. Okay. It's support. You need someone and people in plural to be able to have an environment that helps you substitute these things in your early stages until you can get away from them, because they do have addictive chemicals in them. Okay. So we need to be able to pull you out from there. In a lot of cases, some may need substitutes. There's all kinds of substitutes. Some of the best cheese I've ever had in my life was cashew cheese, period. Okay. So, and as time is going, more people are developing more plant-based cheeses and dairy products due to the fact that, everybody knows the future. Bill Gates said that plant-based meats is the future. People know, because people are starting to know the truth. So you need the support. Okay. You need to start learning more vegan recipes, invest in vegan cookbooks, and, invest in coaching. Okay. You have to be able to do this because your life literally depends on it. If you think these things are expensive, some of you already know, but some of you don't. Try going to the emergency room. Try going to the doctor's appointment. You're gonna walk out of there with $25,000 in debt in 2 hours. Never seen nobody make so much money at that small. 2 seconds you out of there. But we had to put an IV in you. That's approximately $8,000. We had to hear you speak. 2,500. Right? So preventative health is always the best route, you know. And then even when you are having some issues, the natural route still is better. And the only time that I would recommend, you know, advanced Western practices in medicine and treatment is at a severe situation like my arm just got cut off. Other than that, there's other ways. Or if you just at a point to where you've severely damaged your body, like to the point of no return, and now you just kind of make it through. But most people don't fall into those categories. Okay? So wherever you're watching this, you know, two things I want to tell you. Number one is we're having an online holistic health coaching summit coming up on January the 5th. Okay? It's a free online summit, and we're going to be having some of our top pros and professionals give demonstrations, talks, live vegan food cooking, you know, weight loss stories, how we did it, what we're doing, clients, you know. So with that being said, I want you to go ahead and head over to www.holistichealthsummit.info. That's www.holistichealthsummit.info. You can register for free. Go ahead and register for free. From your registration, you know, you'll be sent everything as the weeks come. But I definitely want you to be on there without hesitation. Okay. Last thing is, no matter where you're watching this from as well, be sure to reach out to us. Comment wherever you are. Comment, reach out to us if you want some help. You know, trying to come off of these things. You know, you need help. Reach out to us. You know, and we will help you. Okay. Until next time, head over www.holistichealthsummit.info. And if you're really in need of help and you're really trying to change, reach out to us ASAP. No matter where you're seeing this, we'll give you a free strategy call. Where we'll, you know, attempt to, you know, if your application goes through, we'll talk to you and give you some tips, strategy, free of charge on us. Don't hesitate. Peace.